Hey everyone, quick talk, gun violence. So yeah, it's an issue in our country. And I have a lot to say about it. I want a broader discussion. I think it could take a long time, but I have just one point that I want to make here, one concept that I want to get across. So anytime I have an issue, anytime I have a conflict, one of my basic practices is what I call dig deeper, right? So often we get stuck on the surface. So on the surface of this issue, we're basically pitted in this conflict between people who are saying get rid of all guns and people who are saying everybody should have more guns, right? That's the simple discussion that we're having in our country. Obviously, there's this huge middle ground where people want common sense gun laws and things of that sort. Now, personally, I am a pacifist. I hesitate to use that word because I'm not just like, hey, let's just sit back and get stepped on. But I engage in waging peace. Okay, I don't just sit back and say, oh, kumbaya. I take action for peace. Now, again, that could mean many different things to many different people, but I don't think the solution is just to sit back. I think we have to get involved. Now, as somebody who wants to wage peace, I also am a firearm enthusiast, right? For many reasons. I've studied martial arts my entire life. My sensei, he was a firearm instructor and advocate. We used to have a gun range in my first, or not my first, in my martial arts school when I was a kid. And at the end of the day, there's an undeniable truth with firearms, right? In many ways, they're here to stay. It's just physics, right? Man, we wanted to exert our will on somebody else. We had our fist, we had clubs, we invented spears, bows, projectiles, right? It's just part of physics. You can't just get rid of the concept of guns. Now, with that said, also in terms of self-defense, I advocate proper firearm training and ownership. There is a sense of security that you get in certain situations. I've been in situations where your back's against the wall and there's no way out, and calling 911 is not reassuring in that moment. At least with a firearm and some training, you have a chance to defend yourself and your family in an absolute worst case scenario, right? So those are the two truths. Those things are both true. Now, with that said, the point I want to make here is that oftentimes we leave it to the opposition to make regulations about what we do. And I believe a better approach is to actually take accountability within your field, within your industry, to make changes within. Reasonable, realistic changes that acknowledge the problem, right? So this whole thing of like, oh, we don't have a gun violence problem. It's like, hold on a second. Let's acknowledge that we have a very unique gun violence problem in our country, and let's deal with it, all right? And let's realize that maybe if the goal is for less people to get shot, more guns is not the solution, okay? If I want less people to get murdered, murdering people is not the solution. It's pretty simple, right? Same thing in the meat industry. If you love eating meat, take some accountability, take some responsibility for where your meat comes from. Instead, it's vegans basically pushing the front line of animal rights and responsible, husbandry or farming and whatnot, rather than meat eaters saying, hey, you know what? I actually care where my meat comes from, and I want to do everything I can to make this as sustainable and respectful as possible of a process. So same thing with gun violence, right? Don't leave it to people who completely have a fear, no knowledge, or whatever approach towards guns where they are just completely anti. Don't leave it to them to make the decisions about moving forward. And again, I love these people. I'm not saying, oh, they're the enemy. I'm just saying, in some ways, they're distant from the reality of firearms. And the irony here, and here's the biggest part about it, right, is that if you're such a gun advocate because you're so afraid of tyranny and you're so afraid of the government coming and putting their boot on your neck or whatever the case is, I'm not going to argue that. I get that. That's legit historically. And people could argue, oh, it's not the same as it used to be. Personally, I get that. And as somebody who's concerned about that, I believe we need to address the gun violence issue in our country if you wish to continue to lawfully, be allowed to own firearms. Because what's happening right now is that all of the gun advocates who are saying there's no problem, no gun violence problem, we need more guns, mass shootings, it's rap music and video games and all this stuff. No, no, no. All you're doing is forcing the inevitability of an ultimatum when, after what, 100 more, 1,000 more mass shootings? What, when we're all dead? I mean, what? At what point, at some point, there's going to be a serious line drawn and things are going to get much more difficult for responsible, lawful gun owners. To me, it's a slight concern. I'm here in New York City. I'm glad that if you grew up in New York, you know that there's madness everywhere. You can't walk down a block without encountering mental health issues from somebody. We're in a tight proximity. We do not want everyone having guns around here. On the same token, I do want a gun to protect my family in these settings, right? And there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes with that as well. My point is, take accountability, dig deeper, address the problem, and understand the inevitability of ignoring these issues and the pendulum that's going to swing, okay, as we continue to keep our heads in the sand. And, again, it's real simple. If you want less people to get shot, perhaps more guns is not the solution, right? Now, don't get me wrong. There's two sides to every coin. Violence is not the answer. Historically, violence has been the answer for many things. Might makes right, right? But we have to make choices. We have to dig deeper and say, hey, what do we really want here? Part of intelligence is being able to understand complexities. All right, so let's all get our heads out of the sand. All right, let's be responsible. Let's think about, let's be solution oriented. Let's have conversations. Let's meet all on the same page of whether you're on the left or the right or up or down or whatever. We all, for the most part, just want what's best for our children. That's it. Let's meet there and have a discussion. All right, love you all.